They poured concrete into my lake like it was theirs. So I took the one thing they never thought anyone could take from them. I turned off the water. Not metaphorically, not in some legal back and forth dragged out over years. I mean, I physically shut it off, and I watched their $1 million view turn into cracked mud in less than 3 days. Now, before you decide I'm the villain in this story, you gotta understand where I was coming from, because none of this started with revenge. It started with something that had my family's name on it long before any of those houses were even blueprints. My name's Cole Harper. I'm 42, diesel mechanic out in Ridge County, the kind of guy who smells like fuel even after a shower, drives a beat-up and Oppos 99 Silverado that rattles over 50, and yeah, I'm not exactly HOA material. My granddad, Walter Harper, bought that land back in 1948, 3 acres of red clay, scrub oak, and a natural spring-fed lake he dug out himself with rented equipment and stubbornness. Folks around here used to call it Harper's Basin. He stocked it with base, built a spillway dam on the southeast corner, and made damn sure everything that flowed in and out of that water ran through his hands. When he passed, the land skipped my dad and came straight to me. Long story there, but let's just say my dad and that place never got along. I didn't move on to it full-time, but I kept it, paid the taxes, came out weekends, fished sometimes, sat on the old dock, and tried to remember what things felt like before life got complicated. Then about 8 years ago, everything around it changed. Developers came in, bought up all the surrounding farmland, and turned it into something called Silver Creek Estates. Gated entrance, stone signs, rows of identical houses with those gray roofs and wide windows. Every driveway paved in polished granite like they were trying to outshine each other. 200 homes wrapped around my little lake like it was the centerpiece of their brochure, except they didn't own it. At first, they acted like I didn't exist. Then they acted like I shouldn't exist. I drive in and get looks, you know the kind, like I took a wrong turn and ended up somewhere I couldn't afford. One time a woman actually slowed her BMW down next to me and asked if I was here for maintenance. I told her yeah, something like that. Still, I kept to myself. I didn't bother them, didn't fish when they were out on paddleboards, didn't make a scene. I figured, land's mine, water's mine, no need to stir anything up. Until one July morning. It was hot already, barely 9 a.m., the kind of heat that sticks to your back. I pulled up near the south bank, and right away something felt off. The shoreline looked wrong. Too clean. Too sharp. Then I saw it. Concrete. Fresh, pale gray concrete stretching out into the lakebed like a scar, maybe 40 feet long, anchored deep. And sitting on top of it was a structure that sure as hell wasn't there the week before. A full-blown boathouse, 6 slips, steel cleats bolted in, polished wood framing, the kind of thing you see in marina catalogs, not on private land. And right there at the entrance, like a slap across the face, was a sign. Private access. Silver Creek residents only. I remember just standing there for a second, hands on my hips, looking around like maybe I missed something. Like maybe I had somehow woken up in a version of the world where people just built on your land and expected you to say thank you. But no, everything else was exactly the same. Except someone had decided my property was theirs to improve. I didn't yell. Didn't call anyone right away. That's not how I handle things. I went home, grabbed my folder, the one with all the old documents, deeds, surveys, even a copy of my granddad's original purchase. Sat down at the kitchen table, grease still on my hands, and started going through it piece by piece. And there it was, clear as day. Property lines cutting straight through that lake, with the basin entirely inside my boundary, and more importantly, the water rights clause. My granddad had written it in iron terms, every inflow, every outflow, controlled through the spillway he built. Which meant one simple thing. They didn't just build on my land. They built on something I could completely shut down. I drove back out there that afternoon, this time with my phone, took pictures of everything, the concrete, the structure, the sign, even the bolts they used. If this was going to turn into a fight, I wanted it clean. That's when I saw him for the first time. Tall, thin, white hair slicked back like he still cared about appearances more than comfort. Linen shirt, expensive watch, standing near the dock like he owned the view. He looked at me like I was an inconvenience. "You're not supposed to be down here," he said, calm as anything. I nodded toward the concrete. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. He smiled, just a little, like I'd told a joke he didn't respect enough to laugh at. Community improvement project, he said. Adds value. To whose property? I asked. He didn't answer that. Instead, he stepped closer, lowered his voice just enough to make it personal. You should talk to the HOA before making assumptions. That's when I knew exactly what kind of man I was dealing with. The kind who thinks paperwork is optional when he believes he's the one in charge. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You might want to check your assumptions first." Then I turned around, walked back to my truck, and drove straight to the southeast corner of that lake, where an old, rusted, cast-iron valve sat half-hidden under weeds and thyme. Most people out there didn't even know it existed. But I did. My granddad showed it to me when I was 12, told me, "This right here, Cole, this is the heart of it all. Water listens to whoever controls the gate." I crouched down, wrapped my hand around that valve, felt the weight of it, decades old, stubborn, real. And for a second, I hesitated. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I knew exactly what would happen once I did it. Then I turned it. Slow at first, then all the way. And just like that, I stopped the lake. At first, nothing looked different. That's the funny thing about big consequences. They don't always announce themselves right away. They just start quietly, like a clock ticking somewhere you can't see yet. I stood there a minute after closing that valve, listening to the faint shift of water pressure through the pipe. Then I wiped my hands on my jeans, got back in my truck, and drove off like I hadn't just set something in motion that half that neighborhood would soon feel in their gut. By the next morning, it started showing. 6 inches down. Not dramatic, not enough for panic, but enough that anyone paying attention would notice the dock posts sitting a little higher than they should, the shoreline pulling back just enough to expose that dark green algae line that tells you where the water used to be. I parked up on the ridge and just watched for a while. A couple residents were out there with their coffee, pointing, talking, probably telling themselves it was evaporation, maybe a heat wave, anything but what it actually was. I didn't say a word. Day 2. That's when the illusion cracked. Water dropped another 6 inches, maybe more, and suddenly that clean, polished look their lake had was gone. The bottom started to show through, patches of mud stretching out where there used to be reflections. The smell hit too, that warm, sour scent of things that had been sitting underwater too long, now getting air for the first time. Around noon, I saw the first real sign of concern. A group gathered near that new boathouse. 3, maybe 4 people, all dressed like they had somewhere nicer to be, pointing at the exposed concrete base like it was betraying them. I almost laughed at that, like the lake owed them consistency. I was leaning against my truck when I heard tires crunching behind me. Black SUV. Polished. Quiet engine. He stepped out like he'd rehearsed it. Same man from the day before. But this time there was no soft smile, no polite tone. Just tension sitting right under his skin. "You need to open that valve." No hello. No pretending. I let a second pass, then said, "You need to get off my land." His jaw tightened. "We both know that's not how this works." "No," I said, pushing off the truck. "We both know exactly how this works. You poured concrete on my property. You built a structure without permission. And now you're telling me what I need to do." He took a step closer. Not aggressive, controlled. Lawyer energy. "This is a shared resource," he said. "The community has invested in it." I actually laughed at that. Couldn't help it. "You invested," I said, "in something you don't own." That's when he tried a different angle. "Look," he said, softer now, like we were negotiating over something reasonable. "If there was a misunderstanding, we can resolve it. No need to escalate." I nodded slowly. "You're right. No need to escalate." Then I turned and walked away. Didn't open the valve. Didn't offer compromise. Because here's the thing, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was entitlement. Day 3. That's when everything broke. The lake was gone. Not low, not struggling gone. What used to be water was now cracked earth, stretching out in dry plates. Fish scattered where they hadn't made it back to deeper pockets in time. The boathouse, that proud, expensive centerpiece they'd dropped onto my land, was now sitting on bare dirt, looking ridiculous, like someone had forgotten the point of building it in the first place. And the neighborhood, you could feel it shift. No more morning coffees by the water. No more paddleboards. Just people standing at their back patios, staring out at what used to justify their property value. By that afternoon, word had spread. By evening, offers were getting pulled. I didn't need to hear it directly. You could just tell. The energy was different. Tighter. Nervous. Next morning, he came back. But this time, He didn't come alone. Another man with him, younger, suit a little sharper, eyes scanning everything like he was already building a case in his head. The older one spoke first. "This ends today." I crossed my arms. It already did. 3 days ago. The younger guy stepped in. "Mr. Harper, I'm advising my client to pursue immediate legal action if this obstruction isn't reversed." I tilted my head a little. "Obstruction?" "Yes," he said, confident. "You've interfered with a communal water feature." "It's not communal," I cut in. "Check your paperwork again. We have documentation." "So do I," I said, and walked to my truck. I could feel them watching me as I opened the door, reached inside, and pulled out a manila folder. Took my time flipping it open, like this wasn't the moment they thought it was. Then I handed it over. Survey maps, deed, water rights clause, everything. The younger lawyer skimmed it at first, then slower, then again. His expression didn't explode or anything dramatic. It just tightened. Subtle but real. He leaned toward the older man and said something under his breath. And just like that, the balance shifted. The older man, his name, I'd learned by then, was Victor Langford, looked at me differently now. Not dismissive anymore. Measured. "You're saying," Victor said carefully, "you control the outflow." "I'm not saying it," I replied. "It's written. And the structure. On my land," I said. "Without permission." Silence sat there for a second. Then Victor straightened up, smoothed his shirt like he was resetting himself. "This can still be resolved," he said. "Yeah," I nodded. "It can." I reached back into my truck, pulled out another paper. This one cleaner, newer. An invoice. I held it out to him. He didn't take it right away. Just looked at me. "What is this?" "Cost of fixing your mistake." He took it. "Read it." And for the first time since I'd met him, he lost composure. $69,500? He snapped. "You've got to be kidding." "Structure removal," I said, calm as ever. 47.5. Land restoration, 22. That's me being reasonable. That's extortion. "No," I said, shaking my head slightly. "Extortion would be me asking for more than it costs." He stepped closer, voice lower now, sharper. "You think you can hold an entire community hostage?" I met his gaze without blinking. "I think I can leave that lake exactly how it is, forever." That one landed. You could see it. Because this wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. And for the first time, he didn't have it. The younger lawyer cleared his throat, stepped in again, but this time his tone had changed. "Mr. Langford," he said quietly, "we should review options." Victor didn't respond right away. Just stared at me, like he was trying to figure out if I'd blink first. I didn't. Eventually, he folded the invoice once, clean, precise, and slipped it into his jacket. "You'll hear from us," he said. I gave a small nod. "I already have." They turned, walked back to their SUV, and drove off slower than they arrived. And just like that, the fight had officially started. But the truth is, it was already over. They just didn't know it yet. For the next few days, everything went quiet on their end, at least on the surface. No more surprise visits. No more demands shouted across property lines. Just a kind of tense silence that hung over the place like everyone was waiting for someone else to make the next move. But underneath that silence, things were shifting fast. I heard bits and pieces through a guy I knew who did inspection work in the area, said realtors were scrambling, listings getting pulled or quietly adjusted, buyers suddenly reconsidering, once they realized that lake wasn't some guaranteed feature. It was controlled by a guy they'd never even met. Turns out people don't love investing in a view that can disappear in 72 hours. By day 5, the mud had started to crack deeper, long jagged lines running across what used to be water, and that boathouse. Man, it looked worse every day. Sitting there on dry ground, tilted just enough to feel wrong, like it didn't belong to anything anymore. Which, technically, it didn't. I went out there early on day 6, just walking the basin, boots pressing into the hardened mud, checking things over. I wasn't rushing anything. That part's important. This wasn't me throwing a tantrum. This was me letting reality do its job. Around mid-morning, I heard an engine behind me again. Same black SUV. But this time, it stopped further back. Victor stepped out slower than before, no sharp movements, no immediate demands. Just stood there a second, looking out across what used to be his community centerpiece. Then he walked toward me. No lawyer this time. That told me everything I needed to know. He stopped a few feet away, hands loosely at his sides, like he was trying to approach this without setting anything off. "We've reviewed the documents," he said. I nodded once. "Figured you would." Another pause. "You're within your rights." There it was. No apology, but acknowledgement. I let that sit for a second before saying anything. No need to rush the moment. "So," I said, "where does that leave us?" He exhaled slowly, like this next part cost him something. "You'll get your payment." "Not, we'll discuss it." "Not, we'll negotiate." "You'll get your payment." I tilted my head just slightly. "All of it?" "Yes." 15 days? He hesitated, just a fraction. 8. I almost smiled at that, but kept it contained. "All right," I said. 8. Another pause, but this one felt different. Less tension, more calculation. "On one condition," he added. I raised an eyebrow. "Careful." He gave a small, humorless breath. "Future use of the lake. The community will need some level of access." There it was again, not entitlement this time, but necessity dressed up as negotiation. I didn't answer right away, just looked out across the empty basin, let the silence stretch a little. Then I said, "I figured you'd ask that." I walked past him toward my truck, reached inside, and pulled out one more document. I'd already drafted it the night before, just in case it came to this, which, honestly, I knew it would. I handed it to him. He read it carefully, and the longer he read, the tighter his expression got. "A 25-year easement," he said. "Renewable," I added. "For 1,000 annually." "Per year," I said. "For use, not ownership." His eyes moved down the page. "All structural additions subject to your approval." "Correct." "And water levels." "Controlled by me," I finished. He looked up then. "This puts you in permanent control." I shrugged slightly. I already was. That one, he didn't have an answer for. We stood there a second longer, the wind moving lightly across that empty stretch where water used to be, like the place itself was waiting to see how this ended. Finally, he folded the paper, slower than before. "This is aggressive." I nodded. "So was pouring concrete on someone else's land." That landed exactly how it needed to. Another long pause. Then he extended his hand. "I'll have the check by the end of the week." I shook it. Firm. No smile. "No delays," I said. "None," he replied. And just like that, it was done. Or at least, the hard part was. Over the next 3 days, the noise came back, but a different kind. Not construction like before, not careless and confident. This time it was controlled, deliberate. I brought in a 60-ton crane, crews with jackhammers, saws, trucks lined up along the ridge. And piece by piece, that boathouse came apart. Wood first, then steel, then the concrete base, cracked and lifted out in sections like it had never belonged there to begin with. 12 dump trucks by the time it was done. 12. I stood there through most of it, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see it through. There's something about watching a problem get undone the right way that sticks with you. By the end of it, the lakebed looked clean again. Not perfect, but honest, like it had been given back its shape. On the 8th day, right on time, Victor showed up. No SUV this time, just a sedan. He walked up, handed me an envelope without saying much. I opened it. Cashier's check. $69,500. Exact. I nodded once, folded it, slipped it into my jacket. Then I handed him the easement agreement. He didn't read it again. Didn't argue. Just signed. Because at that point, there wasn't really another option. Before he left, he paused, looked out over the basin one more time. "You're going to turn it back on?" he asked. I followed his gaze. "Yeah," I said. "I am." He nodded slowly, like he wasn't sure if that made him relieved or uneasy. Then he got back in his car and drove off. I waited until that afternoon. Sun sitting high, heat settling in, the kind of day where water feels like the only thing that matters. I walked back to that old valve, crouched down, wrapped my hand around it again. Same weight, same resistance, but this time, different meaning. I turned it, slow at first, then all the way open. You couldn't see it immediately, but you could hear it if you listened close. That low rush starting back up, water finding its path again, filling something that had been empty. By the next morning, there was a sheen across the basin. By the end of the week, the lake was back. Not exactly how it was before, but close enough that most people wouldn't know the difference. Except now, they understood something they hadn't before. It wasn't theirs, and it never would be. These days, they still use the lake. Carefully, politely. Every new structure goes through me. Every change gets approved, or it doesn't happen. And every year, that payment comes in right on time. For $1,000. Regular as the seasons. Sometimes I sit out there on the old dock, same place my granddad used to sit, watching the water settle, listening to the quiet. And I think about how close that all came to going a different way. Because I could have handled it differently. Could have argued. Could have filed complaints. Could have let it drag out for years. But instead, I turned a valve. So here's the question. If someone built on your land, without asking, without respect, just assuming they could, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have let it slide, for the sake of keeping the peace? I'm curious where you land on that. Let me know.